Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on building public-private partnerships to accelerate clean cooking access in African informal settlements. This is actually the second webinar hosted by ICLEI Africa and Energy for Impact under the ENACT project. My name is Carine Buma, a professional officer at ICLEI Africa, and I have the pleasure of moderating this webinar today. Please note that the session is being recorded, and this is for reporting purposes and to ensure that we are able to develop a summary document and share this with you after this webinar. The recording will also be uploaded to our platforms, including the project's website and ICLEI Africa's YouTube channel. The ENACT project is funded by the UK government's Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office through the Transformative Energy Access platform that is managed by the Carbon Trust. The project is implemented by ICLEI Africa with support from Energy for Impact, and it's being implemented in 2 cities, as we would highlight a bit more along the session, in Freetown and also in Kampala. The aim of this project actually is to enable partnerships between the public sector and the private sector to build or enhance a transition to clean cooking in African cities, especially its informal settlements. This project, the ENACT project, also aligns very closely with ICLEI Africa's agenda of supporting and promoting urban development in African cities. So ICLEI Africa is a network of over 450 cities that are committed to promote development across a number of sectors, including low emission, nature-based development, circular economy, and resilient development in the cities. The massive turnout for this webinar, and I'm hoping that more people are still going to join us, is quite impressive, and it speaks to the level of interest in the level of interest amongst different people, the consciousness about the importance of partnerships in accelerating clean cooking access in African informal settlements. I am really excited to be here today and thrilled to be facilitating this session here today with you all. The goal of this webinar is to set the pace, to sparkle that discussion for people to start engaging and discussing a bit more on the topic in order to spur discussions and actions on building these partnerships that would promote clean cooking access in Africa. We are also going to touch on the aspects of affordability, because we know one of the key concerns of raising or improving clean cooking access in African cities is that of the high cost or that of affordability. So we are going to be touching on that also. A quick overview of the session. The first part of this webinar, we are going to have interventions from the private sector. So Mercy is going to start by setting the scene, but immediately after that, we would have interventions from private sector actors who recently conducted feasibility assessments in Freetown, in one of the informal settlements there called Susan's Bay. And they have very rich experiences and recommendations that they will be sharing with us within this session. After that, we're going to have a short 10-minute break for a pause for Q&A. And then we would move to interventions from other development partners joining us here today. This includes MEX, the Modern Energy Cooking Services, and also the Clean Cooking Alliance and the Carbon Trust who have joined us here, but also the city reps will be sharing their experiences as well. And then we would have a final Q&A session, and then we'll wrap up and close the session. Throughout this webinar, please feel free to engage on the chat section as much as possible. After all, that is the objective of this webinar, to build partnership that would help us move in the right direction of taking action. So Please, if you've not done so already, introduce yourselves on the chat. Tell us where you're joining from if you do not get the chance to do so when we launch the poll, and tell us your expectations for this webinar, and just share your experiences and inputs also along the way as we go, because I know we have participants from the public sector, but also from the private sector, from academia. So share your thoughts on this topic. We'd really like to hear from you. And then there is, very importantly, the Q&A section also of this platform. And if you're unable to locate it, please type on the chat and one of the team members would be there to assist you. If you have any questions about the topic we are discussing here today, please key in your questions on the Q&A section. Would endeavor to respond to your questions as soon as they come in. But in addition to that, we also have a dedicated Q&A session within this webinar where most of your questions will be addressed. And if we do not get the chance to do so, we are going to provide a summary response to all the questions posed within this webinar and share with all participants. And moving forward, here are our speakers, our high esteemed speakers who have availed themselves to speak to us, to share their experiences with us here at this webinar. I'm not going to introduce them individually at this point, but I'll do so progressively as we carry on with the session. I hope you are as excited as I am today to learn from these experts who will be sharing their lessons and recommendations with us, but also very excited to learn from one another by engaging on the chats, by making your inputs and your contributions and posing the questions. And we are hoping that this would be a very engaging session and very beneficial for us all. All right. Without further ado, I would like to call on our very first speaker, who is also a part of the ENACT team, Mercy Rose, to set the scene by providing an overview of what ENACT is very briefly, and just why we are at this point. The process will follow to recruit or contract service providers to conduct feasibility assessments in Freetown, our challenges, and just set the scene for these private sector actors to share their ideas. So Mercy is a program lead at Energy for Impact. She has over 8 years in the field working at supporting energy companies to build innovative business-led models to drive clean cooking access or clean energy access, especially for the low-income households in urban and rural areas. Thank you so much, and over to you, Mercy.
Great. Thank you so much, Carine, for that introduction, and thank you everyone for taking the time to join this webinar. And we hope that as we continue with the discussions and towards the end of the webinar, this will be of use to you both from your own personal interest and for your own work. So just to give a bit of background about Energy for Impact, some of you may already know that Energy for Impact and Mercy Corps joined forces in 2021 to magnify our work by working with the poor and vulnerable to improve livelihoods and catalyze development. So this merger enables us to pool resources and expertise, not only geographically in Asia, Africa and the Middle East, but also on a sectoral scale. I'm just happy to mention here that we're 1 year into the merger now, and we're really excited about the journey so far, and we're excited to also share this journey with you, our partners. Next slide, please. So over today's webinar, as Carine had mentioned, in this session, I will provide some bit of background on ENACT. and what the program is looking to address. I will then proceed to provide some bit of detail into how we got to working with the 3 service providers that we selected in Susan's Bay, Freetown, Sierra Leone, for this program. And as I go through this session, I very much encourage, and I would be eager to hear about your own experiences and lessons in how you have collaborated with different partners or different market players to improve energy access in urban informal settlements, wherever you are operating. Next slide, please. Okay, so why focus on energy in urban informal settlements? Just click next again. According to the UN Habitat, over half of the population, of the world's population, currently lives in urban areas. The number is expected to rise to 70% by 2050, most of which will take place in Africa and Asia. So at this point, we can safely conclude that the world is becoming more urban with every passing year. So this is something that will likely not change over the coming years or coming decades. Urban areas typically offer opportunities for wealth creation, employment, improved quality of life, and increased social diversity. But in Africa, urbanization is not happening as following the same pattern as other areas across the world. This does not bring the same level of economic growth or economic freedom as experienced in other regions of the world, since this region is urbanizing at a much lower GDP per capita level compared to other regions. And this has led to a growth in the number of urban poor in sub-Saharan Africa. At present, we estimate about 60% of urban dwellers in Africa live and work in informal settlements and slums, and are often left out of urban development plans, leading to missed services that affect their livelihoods and quality of life. So while we know that this is a problem, not much can be done at the moment without consolidated data or evidence about the issues that affect the urban poor, and this is something that ENACT is looking to address. Please click next. And fortunately, the structure of urban areas presents a great canvas from which we can test and scale market-led solutions that contribute to increased access to quality services such as energy. Carine, I think I just lost the presentation, sorry.
That's a technical glitch. I think it's been addressed. You should see the slide now.
No worries.
Okay. You should have it now, Mercy.
Cool, thank you, and apologies for that, everyone. So as I was saying, even against the background of this problem or this challenge, we are fortunate that there are structures that exist in the urban space that present a good canvas from which we can test and scale market-led solutions that contribute to increased access to quality service, such as energy. And this is what ENACT will be looking to leverage throughout the period of this program. Next slide, please. So, this is where the ENACT program comes in. So since 2020, ICLEI Africa and E4I have been working closely with the local governments in Freetown, Sierra Leone, and Kampala, Uganda, to improve access to energy and informal settlements in these cities. And we're doing this by incorporating three main pillars. The first one focuses on engaging with and building the capacities of local governments in areas on inclusive energy planning and implementation. The second entails collaborating with the private sector to not only demonstrate the value of improving access through market-led solutions and innovative solutions, but also to facilitate public-private partnerships and drive investments into the urban informal space. And while the third pillar, so in the third pillar, we are sharing knowledge and experience with the wider audience in the energy access and policy space through platforms such as this webinar, case studies, peer-to-peer engagements, in-country roundtable dialogues. And we aim to continue engaging actively with you all on areas around energy access and how it links to other cross-cutting issues such as climate change, adaptation and resilience, financial inclusion, and gender inclusion. And of course, finally, from our bilateral engagements with both local governments, that is the Freetown City Council and the Kampala Capital City Authority, clean cooking was recognized as a pertinent challenge in the urban space. So ENACT will predominantly focus on clean cooking, but that doesn't mean that we will leave out other energy or other areas on energy access, such as access to electricity for lighting, such as appliances for both household and productive use, and of course, other cross-cutting areas. We will still continue exploring this through our engagements with the stakeholders and and partners throughout this program. Next slide, please. So now on to the meat of this webinar, just to give you a bit of a background of how we got to where we are, how we selected the clean cooking companies that we're working with at the moment. I have to say it has been quite an interesting journey for us, especially in Sierra Leone, looking for suitable clean cooking companies with whom to collaborate in clean cooking interventions. So we started, first of all, with actually launching an open call for proposals in 2020. We had, after bilateral consultations and engagements with the Freetown City Council, to design suitable models that would work in Susan's Bay in Freetown. So as a result, we only got 2 applications, both of which were ineligible, and therefore we had to go back to the drawing board and decide what to do next, as we have this grant amount, we have this money, but it kind of seemed like no one was interested in that money. And what we found out after going back to really redesign or look at what went wrong is that our approach was a bit different. And after having some further bilaterals with the Freetown City Council, with the project funders through Carbon Trust, as well as consulting a few private companies that operate that provide clean cooking solutions in sub-Saharan Africa, we found that we had to do a bit of a pivot in the way we implement, and therefore include a feasibility include a phase where a feasibility assessment would be carried out prior to intervention. And this is because most of the companies did not, this was a new market for these companies, and they wanted to be sure that their businesses would work. So next, we pivoted and then selected 3 companies to conduct a feasibility assessment in Susan's Bay. And this has already been concluded and it's under review at the moment. From there, we will then carry on and select 1 or 2 of them to implement, given some of the constraints in our the grant budget available. And we then intend to implement actual or practical solutions for a period of 9 months, potentially starting from November. And we intend to continue sharing the outcomes and the lessons from our experience so far in with you all through various means. Let me just, before I move on, I need just to mention here that this is all quite, I would say, a novel and very exciting opportunity for all of us. And we hope to continue going on this journey with you all. And we hope you're also as excited and interested as we are. Next slide, please. So finally, who are the service providers that we ended up going with? I think we're very honored to have on board here high-level partners such as Afrigas, who are a leading LPG distributor in Sierra Leone and who have a passion to bring clean cooking to the base of pyramid demographic. We also have with us ILEM Africa, who not only bring with them a lot of experience on energy policy, but also have a good understanding of community-led design for clean cooking, and also bring with them a very interesting angle to how to improve access to energy and being careful about ensuring that the end users can go up the clean cooking ladder in a more comfortable and financially suitable way. And then finally, we also have PayGas on board, who come with them, who come with a revolutionary way to look at how we purchase or how LPG is distributed. We have traditionally looked at PayGo for LPG, but they come in with a patented pay-as-you-gas methodology that allows people to not only be able to afford the cylinders and the assets, but also be able to only pay for what they can afford when it comes to LPGs. So I welcome the 3 service providers in this webinar, and please join me as we welcome them and as they speak about their experiences. Over to you, Carine.
Thanks so much, Mercy, for that very comprehensive and succinct overview or background to the ENACT project, which then leads us to the next phase of the webinar, where we are going to have the service providers who conducted feasibility assessments in Susan's Bay, Freetown. Here's an image of Freetown, of Susan's Bay, in case you were wondering. They'll be sharing their experiences with us. So the very next speaker, or our first speaker from the private sector, would be Philippe Publix. So Philippe is a co-founder of PayGas. PayGas is a South African startup that is piloting, as Mercy mentioned, an innovative pay-as-you-gas model where the end users are able to pay only for what they are able to afford at that given point in time. They've piloted this in a number of African cities, but mainly in low-income households in South Africa, and are looking to pilot something similar in Susan's Bay based on their assessment. So Philippe is going to be sharing his experiences in Susan's Bay with us, the approach they intend to launch or pilot in Susan's Bay, but also the kind of partnership that they would need as a private sector to enhance this implementation of this innovative model. So over to you, Philippe.
Thank you very much, Carine and Mercy. So hello, everyone. So my name is Philippe. I'm the CEO and co-founder of PayGas. with the energy tech who provide clean cooking gas, LPG, to low-income area, allowing clients to start refilling their canister from 50 cents of dollars. So yes, so we're very glad to be invited and to be part of the Philippe study, and very interesting to, if we go on the slide 2, that to understand what are the main difference between the area we're operating, mainly in South Africa. We're operating in almost 10 townships in South Africa, from Cape Town to Soweto. And Susan's Bay was quite a bit different. So first is the density of population. From our survey, we estimate that there are about 27,000 people per square kilometer. It's one of the largest and poorest informal areas in Freetown. We also discovered that charcoal and wood are the main usage for cooking. It's about 99% of the population, where, for example, in South Africa Township, people are using still like 6–10% of the population using already gas, cooking gas, and many of them rely on electricity, legal or illegal, but they can still use electricity or paraffin. So in Susan's Bay was completely different, where it was only charcoal. And then with the problematic of indoor pollution and health, that we estimate about 333 women dead every year due to this air pollution. And on top of health issues, there's also burning, because when you cook with the pot between your legs, you got burning on the legs, on the arms. So it was really, for us, it was really a really challenging situation in Susan's Bay that we were rarely seeing in South Africa. So for the next slides, we saw that, yes, what is the problem of gas today? The problem of gas today is, if you look to a canister about 6 or 9 kg, it's about $12 you need to buy every time you need to refill. And if you look on the poverty line from the World Bank, it's $2 per day. So you got $12 on one side if you refill your canister full, and $2 in your pocket. So that is the main barrier of gas, is you can't buy gas if you can't buy a full cylinder. So what you have assessed is, okay, how much people are buying charcoal per day? So basically, they sell foods, and then they get money, and they buy the charcoal. So sometimes they purchase charcoal like twice a day for about 8,400 leon. So it's about 80 cents, let's say, USD. And that is the way they are cooking. They use charcoal because they can split in small quantity while they are selling the product. And this fractional way of processing energy is expensive and unhealthy for the client. So the idea is, with 80 cents of USD available, could you refill with gas? Yes, it is. So the idea is exactly addressing the problem of breaking the barrier by allowing community of Susan's Bay to start refill their canister from 5,000 leon. Yes, 5,000 leon is maybe 2–3 mil, but they can have access. They don't need to buy a full cylinder, about 120 leon, so about $12. So by allowing people to refill on the pay-as-you-gas, like we do in South Africa or Nigeria, can really break the entry barrier to cooking with gas and with a full cylinder. So on the next slide, what is important is what is our track record. So PayGas, as I say, is an energy tech company. We already sold 600 tons of LPG with the technology, 95,000 client transactions, about 10,000 households are using pay-as-you-gas in South Africa. And more important is, we've saved more than 22,000 tons of wood or CO2, thanks to moving people from charcoal, paraffin to clean cooking gas. So the last slide is, okay, how do we partner? So very important to understand, as energy tech, we partner with different stakeholders. First, authorities. So we first address to the city, like City of Cape Town, Johannesburg, Freetown, to say, okay, we are happy to bring this technology to the slums, but we need some space to deploy the refilling station. So we work closely with land department, with fire department, with building department, so we can, because gas is heavily regulated, and we want to keep the standards. So we work first with the local authorities or national authorities. Then we work with gas company. So we are only a technology company. So we work with local LPG company to allow them to use our technology so they can serve and extend their network to low-income households. And safety, for sure, fire department, all the safety body. And also economic inclusion, we work, especially in South Africa, we work with franchise model, allowing entrepreneur to start their business on pay-as-you-gas. And so partnership is really the core of the deploying model of PayGas. And this is where we would like to operate in Suzanne's Bay, also with these different partnerships. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that brilliant presentation, Philippe. What I'm hearing from your model is it's being rolled out in such a way that people can pay for what they can afford at that point in time. And for informal settlements, just having Suzanne's Bay in mind, they often purchase their fuels on a daily basis, right? Which means if they're able to, if they have just $1 or half a dollar, they can purchase gas and they can cook with it. We have a few more minutes with you. Just at the back of that, South Africa might be different from most of your experience has been in South Africa with rolling out this LPG-based solution. But an informal settlement like Suzanne's Bay, where they've hardly used gas before, do you think it's a viable solution to use in an informal settlement? And in addition to that, the safety concerns around using LPG in such an informal settlement, how have you addressed that, or how do you look to addressing that in a community like that?
So it's a very good question, Carine, and it's true that in South Africa, people still have access legally or illegally to electricity or paraffin, alternative energy to cook. But it's still 60% of our clients who are doing partial refilling. When we came in Suzanne's Bay and we did a feasibility study, we realized that it might be 90% of the population who will be interested for partial refilling because they can't really afford to buy a full cylinder. So that's the very, very
okay. I'm not sure.
Sorry,
okay, you're back.
I think we have. So yes, so the difference is also, so gas, yes, gas, everything is about education. And if you look on the fear of gas, you need a lot of education to sensitize people. We're always working close with fire department in South Africa because there's a lot of shacks fires with paraffin. Charcoal is splitting, you know, when you do charcoal, there's a wind, you can split like sparkles. That never happened with gas. And so, but also is the time. What is important is when I discover cooking with charcoal when I was younger, it takes time. You want to boil water, it's 45 minutes. With gas, it's like 5-10 minutes. So on the top of safety is also saving time to people, because in Suzanne's Bay, the usage of charcoal is more for street cookers. Let's say it's cooking, it's business, cooking business. They need to be able to cook, to sell the food, and it's more a business usage of charcoal. And we believe that saving time, where you don't need to burn your charcoal while you are waiting for client, you just switch off the flame and reheat when the client is coming, can do additional saving. So yes, Suzanne's Bay is clearly with well education program a very, very good, could be a very good beneficiary from the PayGas solution.
Okay. All right, no, that's great to hear. Thanks for responding to that, Philippe. And I see a lot of questions also coming from our participants with respect to what you're just talking about now. Just to let our participants know that we'll have a session for Q&A, so keep the questions coming. Philippe would also respond to them directly on the Q&A session. Thanks, Philippe. We'll get back to you during the Q&A session. I would also then like to introduce our next speaker, still from Sierra Leone, Sahid. Sahid is the general manager of Afrigas, Sierra Leone. So he has over 10 years of experience working with Afrigas in Sierra Leone to improve to expand access to the use of gas for cooking in Sierra Leone, but also neighboring countries around Sierra Leone. And they've previously attempted to reach out to low-income communities or informal communities within Freetown or within Sierra Leone to roll out the use of LPG, but this was met. They had a few challenges previously when they attempted to do that. So we're going to have Sahid share his experiences with us as well. He's going to, based on their long experience working in Sierra Leone and in Freetown in particular, he will share what has worked for them, the challenges of experience, especially previously, and why they haven't launched or piloted their work in informal settlements yet. And also, this is very important because during the assessment that they conducted a few months ago, it was noted that very little or no single household was using LPG to cook within Susan's Bay. So it's a question of why is that so? And do we think they are now ready to use LPG as a fuel for cooking, as a cleaner fuel for cooking? And he would also, of course, talk about how they are what they're currently doing to improve the affordability of LPG in Susan's Bay and the kind of partnerships that they need, the kind of support that they need from other actors in the sector to support. So thanks, and over to you, Sahid.
Thank you, Carine, and good morning, everyone. Afrigas basically started about 10 years ago, and the idea was to create a better pricing structure for gas by using economies of scale. And with that, we were able to, not easily, but we were able to increase the sales from something like just 10 tons a month to what is now around 200 to 300 tons a month. That said, it's been a journey, an interesting one. And for the urban slum areas, unfortunately, we were not targeting that to begin with. We were targeting, if you like, the general population on a national scale to make sure that they understand the availability, the affordability, and of course, the convenience of using gas. With that, we did a lot of sensitization. And one thing we noticed, interestingly, is from Sierra Leone to Nigeria to Tanzania, there's one thing which is fear of gas by populations across Africa, and the assumption is that it's something that's unstable and might explode at any minute. It took us a while to make sure that we educate people. We had to do public displays of using gas, but at the same time making sure that they understand the safety aspect needed to do so. And the way we've been able to do this has been to ideally go into certain communities, do a display of how the thing is working, do a general cooking in public, identify what we call community ambassadors. And from there, small businesses started seeing the interest and getting the interest. And our biggest success in Sierra Leone has been the vendorship network, which we've been able to create. So rather than going to general fuel stations and maybe to supermarkets, we have been able to propagate sales of gas within small community-based grocery stores that have made it easily accessible to the general population, especially low-income members of the population. And this was unheard of 10 years ago. To put it in perspective, our pricing in Sierra Leone is about $1,000 less per ton than in Guinea and Liberia up to now. And this has been one of the main factors that have allowed us to propagate. To agree with what Philip said earlier, the biggest challenge really in the gas business has been the first set of the unit, like the cylinder and the gas, and that upfront payment has been a challenge. We've tried different models. We've tried models that basically are to do with just below cost. So we would initially we were selling it below cost and recovering some of that cost with the retail. That was a challenge in the sense that because the trading borders in Sierra Leone and Liberia are rather porous, it seemed like our cylinders were basically moving across the border and not coming back, which was, from a business sense, not the intention of what we had. So we've had to remodel that over the years to ration the cylinders. But in general, we are going into more populations and more communities as we go along. Now, coming down to Susan's Bay specifically, we had tried Susan's Bay because it's rather in the main city. But unfortunately, Susan's Bay has had its own challenges. And a few years ago, there was a big fire. So at the time we went there, it was unfortunately not their priority. They had problems with housing. They had other problems rather than just, finding a different way of cooking. And so the priority was different at the time. So thanks to the ENACT project and Africa solutions, we've basically been able to identify a lot of the challenges that they face and some of the potential solutions that we can come up with. And so with that, there's definitely room for growth in those communities to use gas. We have been successful in selling gas to low-income populations across the country. The difference with Susan's Bay or some of these slum communities is a multitude of factors. With Susan's Bay specifically, being more like a wharf area, a lot of wood comes from the provincial parts and specifically mangrove wood, which makes it their main income for the people within the community, as is charcoal as well. And so moving to a different one needs to have the right incentive. So again, pricing issues are the main challenge in terms of that upfront cost. And to offset that, one of the models we've tried is to link up with microcredit organizations. Within these communities, also, you have a lot of informal, if you like, unofficial credit systems within the community. So there will be like organizations that have some sort of a fund for the community, which are also accessible. So there are quite a lot of avenues which we've seen in order to at least get some of the population going in. There's a big chunk of those are the actual commercial cookeries, the ones who produce food for sale. These have been identified, and they do have enough resources to make it affordable. Other challenges within the community, which we found, which was actually rather interesting, is availability of potable water. So, in as much as finding the solution to cook, there was an issue with water availability. So, one of the models we had wanted to do was a community kitchen to test the market. That was deterred really by availability of water across most of the year. So you have to basically buy water. These are all part of what we have put in our study in terms of finding solutions for in the implementation phase. I think this is basically a general overview, I think, of what we've done so far and what we've identified within the community that we've identified, I mean, in terms of Susan's Bay specifically, as to the findings within that area.
Thanks a lot, Sahid. Thanks for sharing that with us. And what I'm picking from your intervention or from your inputs are some of the key challenges, or these challenges can be summed up into that of the pricing, of the LPG themselves, the LPG itself in Sierra Leone, of course, in other African countries, but also that of advocacy and awareness on the benefits of using, or even how to use the LPG solutions themselves safely. And of course, these informal settlements have other competing priorities, like access to clean water, even a decent roof over their heads, and access to good sanitation services, and just to name a few. I'm wondering, and this also speaks to the level or the type of partnerships that we should be establishing to drive this, to address these different sectors of aspects of challenges that we are facing within the sector. So I'm thinking of, for instance, that of pricing, and you've already mentioned you partnered with financial institutions within Sierra Leone. That of for awareness, just partnering. Can you just shed just quickly? Can you just shed more light on how you've partnered even with the local government authority in Freetown or at the national level to drive this agenda, or to encourage the use of cooking, be it the fire department, or be it the education sector, or be it the local government authorities? Like, have you had such an experience or done this before?
If I understand the question correctly, if there's been any incentive from government, is that your question?
If you've partnered with them, if you've worked with the government, so especially on the aspect of awareness, just raising this awareness.
No, not officially. I just have to commend that government has made gas a duty-free item, which I think has helped us be cheaper than the neighboring countries. Okay. So from that angle, I think we appreciate that quite a bit. So the level of investment has basically been quite extensive, because it's something we've learned over the years. It took us 10 years to get here, and it took us about probably 5 years earlier than that to actually put the project together to start. So it's been a long journey. But in terms of local government participation, we interact with the fire force on a regular basis to create awareness, to train our staff, to train our teams, in order for us to also explain to customers and vendors on how to use the gas properly. But there's not been a direct partnership with the government on that direct. We've not had any resistance whenever we've had any challenges. We've been given enough assistance in that sense, but I don't think there's been a program per se that would qualify as a partnership.
I see. Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'll be curious to see to what extent, if we worked a bit more closely with the local government authorities in the respective cities, to what extent this will drive uptake of the solution. Okay, we can take that up later or even during the Q&A session. Thanks so much, Sahid, for your inputs. Okay, now we're going to move to the last speaker for this first half of the webinar, and also the last service provider that conducted feasibility assessment in Freetown. Our next speaker then is Sir Abraham Grass-Sessay. He is the Managing Director at the Institute of Leadership and Environmental Management, ILEM Africa. So Abraham has a wealth of experience in the energy and clean cooking sector, and he's worked very closely with the government, especially the national government, in formulating relevant policies and strategic documents to drive the clean cooking transition in Sierra Leone. Some of these policies include the Cleaner Cooking Energy Compact for Sierra Leone that was recently submitted to the UN High-Level Energy Panel, as well as the formulation of the National Clean Cooking Strategy. So Sir Abraham, he's going to share his inputs also from a policy perspective, just highlighting the existing policies in Sierra Leone that would enable private sector participation in the sector of clean cooking, especially in informal settlements to the extent that is possible. He would also shed light on the approach they followed, or their experience in Susan's Bay as well, and their recommendations post their study. So the beauty or the advantage of ILEM Africa with working with Abraham from ILEM Africa. They're more or less a consultancy or also a research-based organization across a number of topics, so environment and energy. And they went into they went into Susan's Bay with an open mind to explore what would fit the context of Susan's Bay. And he will talk us through that in a bit. So over to you, Abraham.
Thank you very much for having me, Carine, and thank you, my preceding speakers and panelists and member of this webinar. It's very good that this is organized and to share our experience, what we've done in terms of providing access to cleaner cooking energy solutions and advising policy framework that will inform the implementation of program. Let me start by saying that, indeed, as Carine has mentioned, ILEM Africa has 4 thematic outlays on which we do provide our technical support assistance on energy policy advisory and clean cooking, on environmental management and ocean governance, leadership and institutional capacity building, and indeed management for business development services. So when we have this call and how we situate this assignment falls within our work on energy policy advisory and clean cooking solutions. I don't know if the slide is on. I just prepared some photo slides that I can speak to directly. Carine, do you have them on? This basically tells you that when we had this call, hey, go to Susan's Bay, the picture you see on your far left or far right gives you a sense of what the current narrative. People use a 3-fire stone mostly, and as already discussed by Phillipe, we have about 83% of people using firewood and only 13% using charcoal. But then combined charcoal and firewood from our assessment, both are biomass. It means if we want to go into net zero emission and talking about climate transition, we're still not helping the situation, and Susan's Bay itself is down within that ladder. So we think of what optimal solution can we come with that is affordable, that is sustainable, and that can create a quick impact in the lives of people. Action in addressing clean cooking solution goes beyond amplifying the problem of health, the problem of environment, the climate, with emission, the socioeconomic and gender. Because when we even do our interview, it is noted that we have about 87% of our respondents were women. So gender empowerment and women, in the kitchen, it's a daily business. Child labor to go and fetch wood, it's a reality, not only for the slum community, for rural settlement also. So we need a public-private partnership then as we enter Susan's Bay to test and roll out sustainable clean cooking solutions that the community will embrace and that can easily change the lives of the people, that can emit less or near zero emission of CO2. And we decide to say, let's look at ICS. And ICS is what you see at your right, is the improved cook stove. As a consulting firm, what we've done over the time, we've been working also with ICS producers across the country. We have a database of who are producing and where they are. But in the past 2 years, ILEM has said, let's translate our knowledge research. We've designed the Cleaner Cooking Compact. We've worked with AECF TAF in designing the integrated energy policy for Sierra Leone Ministry of Energy. When it comes to cooking, let's not just see designing policies that looks at generating energy for electron, for industrial use, for lighting of our homes, but let's see how we can generate energy for productive use. And when we talk about energy for productive use, let's see how we can also bring renewable in cooking sector. So our option there is, hey, ICS is fine because it will preserve the heat. What you see there is an insulated ceramic clay. And we have established, not just now working with partners, but our own sister company that is called Teranga. So we define policy, but then we translate policy to action. So in Teranga, just very quite recently, we were in Kono. We train about 25 ICS producers. We develop a manual so that there be a standard manual in how you produce ICS. What is the plate size that you use? How the ceramic itself should be processed? And what do you use as an energy fuel? Coming to the energy fuel, as we mentioned on the onset, or as I do mention on the onset, you have 87% of the people using charcoal, firewood, and 13% using firewood. It shows it biomass intensive. That's 98% in total. Now we say shift, yeah, we say shift, and that shift means renewable. So we are looking at saying what would be the fuel now that you bring in a solution that is affordable, that is easily accessible, and that we can move around with. The issue on safety is not much of a concern because we're already using 3 Firestone. And if you have ceramic now that contains the heat and then provide us an energy that is very much more efficient and provide us the heat for us to prepare our food, then what do you use as your fuel? Are you still going to use your charcoal? Are you still going to use your wood? Our answer is no. And we did the calculus. We do an analysis on what is the number of tonnage of rice that is produced in the country annually, 600,000 tons of rice. And the further analysis shows that 20% of that, which is about 120 tons of the 600,000 tons of rice that is produced, is husk. And that husk, with a partner entity that we work with, can be transformed into what we call briquette and can be transformed into what we call pellet. And that pellet is carbonized. When it carbonized, its emission is near zero. It means, again, in terms of capturing the CO2 emission, we then go further, say, hey, test what is happening in Susan's Bay. If we implement this approach, ICS and briquette in Susan's Bay, how does that contribute into the global emission or into the country, contribution to the UNFCCC or the INDC, which is the National Determined Contribution to the Paris Accord? We saw that for a population of 1,566, and a household that has about 3 to 5 people at least could use a bag of charcoal, if not more. So the cost there, in fact, if you talk about, hey, let's switch to LPG, you can say, yes, they can afford LPG because the people can also afford 2 bags of charcoal. And a bag of charcoal is about what? It's about 60,000 now, and the price keeps increasing because of the inflation. Now, going now into the emission level and how that impacts society and globally, we do an analysis for that is 1,566 bags of charcoal that is used on a monthly basis. That amounts to 0.728 ton. That is about 1 ton of charcoal that is used on a monthly basis in Susan's Bay. A further calculation on that gives us a sense that 4,122 pounds of CO2 emission is distributed in the air because you either use charcoal or you use firewood. So our argument there is to say, hey, let's see how we can test this, how we can drive this, how we can introduce this, but then there are things we need to put in place. Sensitization. People to understand this, yes, your briquette that you're using, that we will try to introduce, will not cost as much as your charcoal. Let's also see what are the policy incentive in country. Our Clean Cooking Compact that was just been revised now, in fact, has ensured that briquette is included, pellet is included, as an option moving from biomass energy. Now, when you have this kind of policy arrangement at government level, policy and political level, then it will be easy to mobilize at community level in terms of getting people using this new technology. And the new technology that we are proposing, therefore, is one that will help to clean the air, get a better heat that you need to cook your food. You spend less time in cooking. The next slide shows directly what are the model and what are the different kinds of ICS we produce. You may have ICS that use briquette, ICS that use pellet. People will still be saying, hey, I still want to use my charcoal. I still want to use my coal. So therefore, cognizance of the reality of the traditional way people used to cook, and that myth will not just be over 6, 7, 8 months. So we also say, let's design an ICS that can take charcoal. But when it does take charcoal, it does not emit. There will be a way of getting the ash that is produced on a residue-based plate, and that residue-based plate, and then it can easily be disposed of. So it makes the cooking not to be as dirty as it is. Because when we say clean cooking solution, it means people are cooking in a way that is dirty currently, and we want to get a cleaner option. We also want the people to cook in a way that is energy efficient. Energy efficient means you don't have to use 2 kilos of charcoal. 2 kilos of briquette, from our analysis, gives you 1 kilo of the 1 liter of diesel in terms of the heat it emits. So this calculation, in terms of letting people understand that you getting use of charcoal or moving from charcoal to briquette and pellet is energy efficient, makes you to cook quick, and it's cleaner. In a way itself, it is safe because indeed you've already been using something that gives you sparkling of light, and those sparkling of light, the theory is that it also causes, you know, sometimes the catching of fire in some of the community, although that is not proven. But the fact is, it results to even eye burn, itching of the skin. So the health reality, we also let that to be very clear. We give a sense of how many people are complaining on issue related to respiratory. And it's very important to note that about 75% of the people said over time, the way they breathe now and the way they were breathing before changed completely. So this is what we want to introduce. ICS based on research, based on what people could able to afford, based on the energy that we can also able to produce. And we don't work alone, we work with Phillipe. Phillipe will be the entity, that's another slide, if you can go there, that will be producing. And we already trying to see how we can get that partnership with Teranga. Teranga is based in the outskirts of the city, which is about 14 kilometers out of the Freetown itself, but access itself, our design to say, because you have many people using briquette, then indeed, charcoal and firewood, why don't you use them in the value chain? So we'll be training even these people, and we'll be using them also as a distributor, as our agent. It begs the question, how will they be able to buy? My last point of intervention here from our study in Susan's Bay, we said, let's look of an MFI, let's look of a business model. And the business model, we said, let's talk with Munafa. Munafa has been working with over 700 communities and households in Sierra Leone, slum and deprived community. They will provide us already their system, and we'll peg on their system to provide these people access to ICS and briquette and pellet. So this is how we want to go. Transition itself does not mean just come with something that is totally out of the blues, or something that is within the community that can use, make it to be energy efficient, make it to be safer, and translating the life of people from being a health hazard to more of one that gives them a better cooking solution and a cleaner option. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sir Abraham. Thanks for that very insightful presentation or overview of your approach in Susan's Bay and your recommendations or proposed plan of action in Susan's Bay with respect to deploying improved cook stoves using briquettes and pellets. And when I think about briquettes, I think it's clean, quite all right. The concern, and this is also coming from your assessment in Susan's Bay, the costs would also be quite a concern for informal communities or for low-income households in these communities we are talking about. So the price of briquettes at the moment is about 4 times or so in Sierra Leone, the price of charcoal, which they are currently using. And I'm wondering how this is going to be addressed. That shift, it's good. You've mentioned you're going to bring in finance institutions locally present, but again, this is a potential challenge that needs to be thought through quite effectively at the beginning to ensure that people are even able to buy into this technology, and also awareness on these briquettes themselves. I think the community in question, they were not aware of it, and this would also speak to most communities in Africa, and would like to explore that a bit further. But my last question to you is that around the standardization in Freetown or in Sierra Leone. So the improved cook stoves we have often in Africa that a range of manufacturers of these cook stoves themselves, but even the briquettes. Are there policies in Sierra Leone to ensure that there is standardization of the stoves and the fuels themselves? Are there standardization centers in Freetown or in Sierra Leone in general?
We have, as we speak, only one standardization center. That is the GTI, the Government Technical Institute. They provide you the ISO, the international standards, that at least it will be tested first. UNDP, UNIDO, and the Government Ministry of Energy deploy a testing facility. So when you have a stove from a plethora of stove producers, the stove produced is set into the testing unit. and see, does it emit? And if it emits, how much does it emit? And if it conserves energy, how much does it conserve energy? That's about efficiency. So yes, we have. The second layer is, before you even go there, you go to Standards Bureau. Standard bureaus refer you now to GTI. So the good news, Carine, that what will be deployed and what will be designed for Susan's Bay, which will be for Susan's Bay, will be a 2-burner stove, not as one single burner stove. And people can stand up erect. Other stove producers have been doing that already. Teranga will build on that, and what we've already done with ICLEI. And by the way, ICLEI is the ECOWAS Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. ILEM Africa developed the manual in how to develop cook stove itself. And that will be rolled out for all cook stove producers in Sierra Leone, and that's what Teranga will be using. So standard, yes, is monitored in the country, and there is a unit that does certify.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Abraham, and thanks for speaking to that. At this point, we're going to open it up for other participants to ask questions directly, if you've not done so on the chat or on the Q&A section already. I've seen a number of questions coming in already. But this is a good point for us to pause and take questions and get contributions from the rest of the participants before we move to the last half of this webinar. And I'll invite my colleague Mercy to coordinate that part of it. Mercy, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Carine, and thank you everyone, Philippe and Sahid and Abraham, for your insights so far. So Philippe, there's a question to you from Laura Clough, who is asking, with your model to do households, still need to pay for the cylinder upfront, or do you offer credit so this initial cost is spread out? So I think the question is around the cost of the assets themselves compared to the fuel. Over to you, Philippe.
Thank you very much. So yes, it's a good question. So on the PayGas model, you got a refilling station, and the client need to acquire a canister and a cooker top on it. And so what we do, we partner with a microfinance institution locally for people who can't afford to acquire this startup pack, let's say. And that's why we work. In South Africa, it's a bit different because 98% of the clients say they can save $35 because the cost of starting to be a client of PayGas is $35 per household, and normally they can save it. They do tontines, stock fair, or others. But in Susan's Bay, especially, we went and met with different microfinance institutions, and they were quite keen to be able to give a credit to the client, especially because you can recover the installment of the payments through the refilling. So it's quite easy. It's a closed loop. So yes, we do both. You can either pay it upfront, $35, or you can do a microcredit with your normal microfinance institution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Philippe. Laura, I hope your this question has been responded to adequately. Otherwise, we can share the contacts of Philippe in case you want to understand the model a little bit more after this webinar. So the second question is from Ben Robinson, and I think I can respond to this one. So Ben says, it would be good to know what the reason was to go with LPG providers rather than electric cooking, for example. We all know that beyond LPG being much cleaner for people cooking, it still is a non-renewable resource extracted from the ground with terrible global environmental impact. Yes, Ben, this is usually quite a contentious topic in the clean energy world. But what we can say is, although LPG is a fossil fuel, and the net impact on climate change in settings, especially settings where solid biomass is a main alternative, the net impact is usually neutral or even beneficial. So LPG can greatly help to protect forests from being depleted from charcoal and firewood use, primarily, in areas such as urban spaces, and therefore contribute to preserving the environment. And beyond that, we were also, as I had mentioned, we were consulting very carefully or actively with the local governments, and as part of their climate action strategies, reducing CO2 reduction emissions and reducing household air pollution was at the top of their priority, which it's at the top of their priority to in terms of climate change resilience and climate change action. And a majority, actually both cities, quoted LPG or improved charcoal technologies as a priority for intervention. This is also, we've also been driven by the national strategies. We want to support national governments in their efforts to bring universal energy access. And LPG seems to be quite a priority when it comes to improving clean cooking. So this has been quoted in both national energy, sustainable energy for all strategies of both Sierra Leone and Uganda. So it's one of the reasons why we are prioritizing. But I am happy to expand on this further with you, Ben, beyond this webinar, if I haven't responded adequately to you. Thanks. Yeah, so I'm just going through the list of other questions, and it seems that all the other questions have been responded to directly. So over to you, Carine.
Thanks, Maurice. There was one other question that came in directly during the registration by a participant, and it's still related to LPG as well. And the question is around the rising prices, the rising fuel prices, including the global price increase of LPG and including inflation pressures, and how do we envisage this impacting the rolling out of clean or LPG as a clean cooking fuel in Africa, especially its informal settlements. I think maybe Sahid, you might want to speak to this.
Well, yes, the global price has been a challenge, and to add to that, our local currency devaluation is also a problem. So, moving hand in hand, it's actually become a challenge. So, what we have been basically, for us, because we've been trying to make this thing a product that is available across the board, we have always utilized whatever discounting we can get. So at one point, the exchange rate was going up, but prices of gas was coming down. So we were able to maintain the same pricing. And whenever the currency was stable, but prices went up, we were able to absorb some of that as well. But it's not a sustainable solution if prices go above what they are. The only good thing which we can say is the recent situation with the Ukraine-Russia war has been that prices have been the highest they've ever been, and they've resettled back below that peak. And so I think we've seen, at least for now, unless something else comes up that we're not taking into consideration. But for now, I think we've resettled back into more affordable territory in terms of gas. The other challenge has been really the currency devaluation. We're experiencing that a lot here in Sierra Leone, and Nigeria as well is experiencing something similar. I don't have a solution for that other than we don't raise prices unless we really have to, and we've been absorbing that as best as we can. At least generically, that's the answer I can provide without going into too much boring detail.
Okay, thanks a lot, Sahid. Thanks for that response to that question. And yeah, we hope the prices get as stable as they can to ensure that people are able to buy this gas without the government necessarily stepping in to do gross subsidization of the prices, which will not be sustainable in the long run. Okay.
Carine, sorry, there's one more question that I think would apply to Abraham. So Janet Chapman asks if the stoves using pellets are subsidized by carbon credits. Abraham, are you able to respond to that?
That's a very good question. For now, we are not having subsidy. The ENACT project will give us some grants to roll out. We want to make it as sustainable as possible, without or with grant. The two-pronged approach we are using is if we do have grant for a community, we roll it out. If we don't have grant, we make it such that it can also be affordable for people to purchase directly. I like this phrase, and let me re-echo in making my concluding statement on this question. There's a gentleman in the community that says, take the slum out of the people and not the people out of the slum. So for us, as a private sector entity, we have the onus of moving people to where they are, to where we want them to be in terms of getting them a cleaner cooking solution. That's our responsibility. And so we're not waiting for carbon trusts. And indeed, I will seek the permission from ICLEI ENACT that yes, what we've designed already, we can transform it and then roll it for other communities and get some grant. But in a pure plain language, for now, no grant. We are only rolling out so that people can be able to buy. And we want to peg from Munafa, a microfinance institution that at least can serve as a guarantee and within their system so that people can be paying to what they can be able to afford, weekly or monthly until they're able to pay within a span of 6 months. Over to you.
Okay. Thanks so much, Abraham. I think let's wrap the Q&A session now and move to the next part of the webinar. But before moving on, let me just say it here that as Mercy mentioned initially, the civil service providers have finalized the feasibility assessment reports. They have very rich insights from the community and have made recommendations or proposals on what to implement on the ground. So as the ICLEI Africa team, we are currently evaluating these proposals to see what will be fit for the context, Susan's Bay and its environs in question. So we haven't guaranteed yet that we are going to be able to fund all these proposals that we are receiving, but we are definitely open to partnering with other organizations and institutions that would want to work with us in rolling out these plans within the community, within Susan's Bay or other communities, other informal settlements. All right, great. So the next part of our and last part of our webinar would be hearing from the local government authorities and from the project cities, from Freetown and from Kampala, Uganda, but we'll also hear from a representative from MEX and also the Ghana Clean Cooking Alliance. So I would hand over immediately to Mr. Abdul Karim Mara, who is the development and planning officer at Freetown City Council, and also he leads with NGO engagements at the City Council. And in addition to that, he is the focal person for the ENACT project at FCC. So from a local government perspective or from a public sector perspective, he's going to share also what seems to be the challenge in the sector and how really we can work together to advance, to speed up the process of improving access to clean cooking, especially in informal settlements in Africa. And his experience is going to be based on what's happening in Freetown. So for those who might not know yet, Freetown has set up this very ambitious Transform Freetown agenda that has as one of its objectives that of promoting low emission development in Freetown. And this includes also the planting of 1 million trees within a very short period of time. And based on what we've heard already, with over 90% of the population relying on the use of biomass, there's a potential of this ambition or this target being jeopardized. So I would like to hear what the Freetown City Council is doing, what the enabling or lessons they've learned this far in enabling the transition to clean cooking. Over to you, Mr. Mara, to kindly take us through that.
Thank you very much, Carine. I'll go straight to the point. Transition to cleaner cooking technologies has been a very serious challenge in informal settlement, especially low-income areas like Susan's Bay. One of such challenges can be attributed to the affordability, because it has shown over the period that the traditional clean cooking technology has been very, very common, not because people want to use it, but because it is affordable and accessible. Unlike LPGs, the price is mostly determined by the exchange rate. And as somebody rightly mentioned, we are now in an inflationary period where the price of LPGs will keep on going up. The market supply also for LPG is also limited, preferably maybe because there is not much demand. But for the traditional cooking fuel, it is common. It can be easily accessed because we get it from the forest. And looking at it from the electricity perspective, the electricity supply is also not reliable. So people cannot depend on electricity as a source of clean cooking solution. Next slide. So over the period, we have learned that if we were to address the problem of cleaner cooking technologies, we need to raise the level of awareness at all levels so that people can get used to using cleaner cooking technologies. One of such could be reducing the cost of the clean cooking technologies, providing also affordable option on the purchasing power of people so that they can shift onto cleaner cooking technologies. And looking at the value chain of traditional cooking technologies using the coal and the fuel wood, there is a different value chain involved. If we were to divert people's attention to cleaner cooking solution, it's like depriving them from their livelihood. So we need also to bring them into the value chain so that they could also be part of the process by way of ensuring that their livelihood is also being protected. Next slide. Of course, we know the government is not a good business person. The need for us to work with private sector on a PP basis is very critical. The government has a responsibility to provide the service, and it is not, as a government, would not be able to effectively do so. So the bringing in of the private sector will help greatly in addressing such challenges. And the private sector would also have the leverage of tapping on used opportunities to deliver on private projects, such as the one we are now talking about in Susan's Bay. And the idea of the private sector involvement could also help us to establish good working relationship with FCC. One of the presenters was talking about there hasn't been much partnership with local councils. So I believe if they can partner with us in such interventions, as a local council, we'll be able to provide the enabling environment and the space where they will be able to operate and do their business effectively. Policy legislation will be set to ensure that people will revert to using cleaner cooking solution instead of the use of firewood and coal. And this, in a way, will encourage sustainability in different areas. Next slide. However, FCC also has a role to play in the involvement of clean cooking campaign in informal settlement. Already, we are now promoting the involvement of the private sector by the implementation program, which we are currently now being discussed, such as ICLEI and ENACT programs. And we are also prepared to cooperate with the private sector to address deforestation through the #TransformFreetown campaign. Next slide. We also need the support of the national government, the private sector, and development organization to promote energy access and enable clean cooking. And one, for us to be able to effectively do that, we need to be given the space. Functions such as the devolution of land use planning, which as enshrined in the Local Government Act, has still not yet been devolved to the council. In principle, it is stated in the Local Government Act that this function should be devolved, because by devolving this function, we would have more authority on the use of land, as how land should be used, so that we'll be in a better place to plan the city in addressing such issues. We also believe that if FCC got support from development organization, we can increase funding for programs targeted at improving access to affordable and accessible clean cooking options specific to the context of urban informal settlement. In that way, the private sector can invest in deploying more of their clean cooking solution within the informal settlement and use the opportunity to also expand to neighboring formal settlement and thereby support the green transition across the city. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mara. Thanks very much for that presentation from FCC's perspective. I think you've highlighted very good points there, just bringing the different spheres of stakeholder groups that are needed to foster this or accelerate the clean cooking asset. So you mentioned the private sector. So the private sector needing to work a bit more closely with the local government authorities. In the case of Freetown, to work closely with FCC, so that FCC can provide them with that enabling environment, be it quick approval processes or the permissions, or even showing them where to install or start up their solutions within the community. And in addition to that, also working the support from the national government is also needed. For instance, some functions need to be devolved to the local government level. You are enabled to perform your role. I would also imagine the devolution of devolving the energy, or providing more mandates to the local government in Freetown on the energy sector, so that FCC as the local council can expand their scope, reach in improving clean cooking or clean energy projects directly. Thank you for sharing that, Mr. Mara. So we'll get back to you if there are any questions from the team, but would appreciate you. Our next speaker is from the local government authority in Kampala as well, Mr. Robert Chuchu. I don't know if you're here. Would you please tell me if you can hear us? I'm not sure I can see you here. Okay, it seems it's not available yet. I'll just ask the speaker. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, it seems Mr. Robert Chuchu is not on the call yet. We're going to follow up on that, but we can move on already to our next speaker, who is Malcolm Britnell from Modern Energy Cooking Services. So he is the international liaison manager at MEX. And Malcolm has a lot of experience as well in the finance sector, in pyramid-based end user approaches or models to improving affordability of clean cooking, and also a lot to do with the rolling out of electric-based or electricity-based cooking technologies, which MEX has been working on a lot lately. So he's going to be sharing his insights as well with us and how this has worked for him and what can be done to improve end-user affordability for low-income households, and just the partnerships that are needed to drive this. Over to you, Malcolm.
Thank you very much indeed, Carine, for that lovely introduction. And it's a great pleasure and privilege to be here today presenting Modern Energy Cooking Services. As you might know, this is a large UK government funded program, which is aimed to promote the transition to clean cooking for poorer populations. So I think the starting point for the discussion should be that the clean cooking landscape, we feel, is changing very rapidly and very dramatically. So historically, the clean cooking landscape was really dominated by rather simple solutions, improved cook stove solutions. And these are still very relevant, especially as one of the speakers mentioned earlier, where you're using renewable sources of biomass. But we do feel that in the medium and long term, the objective should be to transition to modern energy cooking with all of the advantages that go with it. And a number of the Philippe and Sahid earlier spoke about the competitiveness already that they see for, in their case, gas, but we think the same is also true for other forms of modern energy cooking. For example, with electric cooking, we now have cheaper and very energy efficient devices available. For example, electric pressure cookers, induction cook stoves. And we also have other types of fuel, ethanol, for example, biogas, which are also providing very clean, very renewable cooking solutions, and together with the advantages that go with that. And together with the change in the landscape, there is a much broader variety of players available. So, for example, historically, if you were looking at these rather the cruder versions of the improved cook stoves, it was the activity was really being dominated more by sort of NGO types or small local companies producing these rather simple, rather unsophisticated, but cheap and useful appliances. But as you move over to modern energy cooking, so you have a whole variety of new players, so mini grid companies, solar home system companies, the appliance companies themselves becoming more sophisticated, in some cases, larger players, utilities starting to get involved, and then the whole of the, what we call the kind of the ecosystem that goes with it, the financing institutions, supply and distribution. And so I think we are moving towards a very different kind of universe and more opportunities to promote clean cooking. So on the next slide, I just wanted to make a kind of simple point that some of the issue, of course, as many speakers have said, is the issue of affordability, and particularly for the poorer populations, which the ENACT program is addressing. So one way to facilitate this is of course installment payments, where you can spread payments over time, and the consumers can use potentially cost savings on, for example, expenditures on charcoal or briquettes, for example, to offset the cost of the appliance, which is basically amortized and phased into the repayment schedules. So to some extent, these can be enabled and facilitated by sort of digital technology and pay-go type systems. In other cases, just simple installment sales can work. And on the next slide, I think that what is really important is to look for ways that the payment gaps and the affordability issue can be addressed. And one of the biggest ways to look at it, I think, is for donors and for other institutions who are interested to promote development to recognize the fact that we are all very aware of, is that clean cooking has huge SDG impacts. So those we know about, obviously, climate impacts from the emission of smoke and black carbon emissions. We know about environmental impacts from for example, deforestation, unsustainable use of biomass. We obviously know about the dreadful health impacts that go with breathing in smoke, and of course the financial impacts that go with that. There are particularly strong gender impacts. People already alluded to the fact that firewood collection is mainly done, almost exclusively done by women, unfortunately. And cooking takes time. So with modern energy devices, you can reduce time cooking, and that of course allows for livelihood improvements through more time available for other occupations, some of which can be income earning. So these are widely recognized by donors, and donors are willing to find opportunities to introduce grant type money, usually on a results-based method, to support interventions which result in concrete SDG impacts. So how can this happen? Well, one of the questions I think came up earlier was through carbon credits. Carbon credits is an extremely good opportunity now to promote clean cooking. Carbon credits, the market now is very buoyant. Prices are going up, volumes are going up, and the opportunities to use these are very considerable. And people will pay premium prices for projects which not only reduce carbon emissions, but have these other associated SDG impacts, which are variously labeled co-benefits. So that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is through RBF programs, results-based financing programs, which we are starting to see in a number of countries in Africa, some quite large programs being initiated. And these are really addressed at incentivizing companies to enter markets and to start providing services which are intentionally going to be sustainable going forward. And another way, of course, is outright grant type programs of one kind or another, but usually these are increasingly linked to particular targeted type programs. I would like to say that donors are also supporting the transition to clean cooking in other ways. We find that the technical assistance grants that have been given out to companies are extremely good, and they've helped a number of the leading companies to transition to better products, cheaper products, scaling up their capacity to deliver services. So these very often link to challenge funds. So there is a lot of work going on in that area. Obviously, concessional loans of one kind or another, particularly to governments. And on that note, we think it's extremely important to integrate clean cooking into the broader energy agendas, that way tapping into larger amounts of money. And that work can be done in different ways. So all of this, I think, is helping. And going forward, of course, we see that the development finance institutions' lines of credit are going to be very useful going into to help local financial institutions help both to clean cooking companies, particularly on, for example, receivables financing, and also, of course, to the whole issue of consumer finance to allow consumers to buy these products, helping the scaling up in a similar way to we saw with the lighting, the Lighting Africa type programs. These can be very important. So, so I think on the last slide, you'll be glad to hear, we obviously recognize that that scaling or introducing clean cooking into displacement settings is a very, very challenging thing to do. And a number of the speakers who know the situation better than I do have already mentioned a lot of the kind of challenges that there are. So, of course, affordability being very important, but logistics, the whole issue of insecurity, the whole way of working is very challenging. So I think that specific models to try and address these issues are very useful. So we've, at MEX, we've been doing some work on electric mini grids, again, around a kind of community-based approach, because I think a community approach is very, very often the right kind of solution. And people talked about, conflicts of interest, existing operators that one does not want to displace, one wants to accommodate. So these kind of models are very important. And I know that E4I, who we had the pleasure to cooperate on some research into this area, have been doing a lot of very good work with Mercy Corps as well on this whole area with the Moving Energy Initiative and things like that. And so this whole kind of concession model where you basically build a specific approach around communities, I think is a very good way forward. And obviously it is going to require some form of concessional finance, maybe with a blended finance approach, maybe with outright grants. But in any case, the combination, we think, of very efficient private sector operators who can bring increasingly effective appliances, working together with governmental organizations, NGOs and the like, to address the issue of leaving no one behind, the poorer populations, the populations which are not normally going to be reached just purely by the private sector. These kind of approaches we think are very important. So thank you again for the presentation and for allowing me to present, and looking forward to listening with interest to the rest of the seminar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Malcolm. Very, very rich insights there from your end. Just covering, I have a dozen of questions for you on things I would like you to expand on. But unfortunately, we do not have the time to dive into all of those things. But it's quite interesting, the things you raised, that of carbon financing, and even that of e-cooking. I'll be curious to see how this would work in informal settlements where they have very low income and electricity being quite unreliable in Africa. Even in South Africa, where we thought we had high reliability, it's failing us. So I'll really would definitely reach out to engage further and to see how to work together and get your insights and apply them also on our project going forward. Please permit me invite our last speaker, and she is female. It's been, we've had a series of male speakers. So our next and last speaker is Adoa Etiwa-Sey. She is the board chairperson for the Ghana Alliance of Clean Cooking, and she also doubles as a senior program officer in charge of operations at World Education. She has over 17 years of experience in this sector. She's leading it and making fantastic influence in her sector. She's also passionate about supporting and advising and guiding startups and small businesses that need financial advice and things like that, but also mentoring other younger professionals in the sector. She is actually my mentor, just to add. So Adoa is going to be shedding a bit more light on the case in Ghana. So Ghana, for those who might not be aware, have made so much progress in this sector of clean cooking, of advancing clean cooking to all Ghanaians. They've set ambitious targets to achieve their goal. And the alliance, the Ghana Alliance for Clean Cooking Stoves and Fuels, have played a huge role in this, in bringing all these actors together, be it the private sector, local government institutions, CBOs, and we'd just like her to share a bit more on these, the success stories, and how the establishment of an alliance like this has helped Ghana move this agenda forward, and what other countries could consider, just the partnerships that this has enhanced. Adoa, please go for it.
Thank you very much, Carine, for the warm introduction. And I'm thinking you know more about the Alliance than I do. That's interesting. Thank you to the other speakers for your wonderful presentations. As an Alliance member, it doesn't matter whether it's for my country. Anywhere I see that clean cooking issues are going on well, I feel very excited. I've been taking notes, and beyond this webinar, I'm sure I'll reach out to you to connect with some of the other speakers to see if there are any synergies and what we can do together. So thank you very much. Yeah, so the Ghana Alliance has been in existence for well over 9 years now. Since its formation, we've worked primarily with government. We've more or less played the role of enablers. So we have helped to foster a very conducive environment for policy advocacy, for engagement of private sector, for awareness creations, for sector coordination, capacity development of our members. Our work is enormous, but I can say that our establishments really has helped to move the sector, or the clean cooking sector in Ghana, forward in a number of ways. As an alliance, one of our primary goals is to also facilitates some kind of financial support for our members. And through our formation and linkage fund is a private financial advisory network. And today our members have opportunities to get access to investments and free business coaching. We are doing other similar things as well. For example, there was a project that was sponsored by the Dutch government, the Voice for Change Partnership Program. That program has really helped us in that it helped to in the development of a number of policies as far as clean cooking is concerned in Ghana. Before, every issue about clean cooking seemed to be hidden under some energy policy somewhere. There were no clear-cut directions for us, but thanks to the V4C program and our involvement in that program, actually we implemented it directly. We've been able to develop a number of policies for the sector. We developed a national roadmap. We have a national strategy. We have a lot of strategy documents which is guiding the government in the sector. And because we were able to foster the establishment of these environments, now we have the likes of the World Bank, ENI Energy, and a host of other institutions very much interested in Ghana and our clean cooking and are really supporting government and private sector at large.
Thanks a lot for that, Adola. Thanks for sharing that. And also, as I mentioned earlier, you also work on the world education at Ghana there. You're also a senior program manager at World Education. And through that, you've also influenced a lot of awareness creation through the educational sector, but also even other sectors, including the health sector, youth, and health practitioners within Ghana to drive this clean cooking access transition within Ghana. Can you also shed more light on that, on the success stories and the value that this has brought to the sector, the partnerships it's enhanced, and just those lessons that we can learn from, and also recommendations for the public and the private sector representatives for this webinar, present at this webinar?
Okay, thank you very much. A quick glance, you would think that the programs are a bit fragmented, but they come together and give a very holistic picture of what's happening as far as awareness is concerned. So for, I'll start from the Alliance level again. We have been involved in a number of awareness creation campaigns where, across the regions, where we use our regional representatives. So we use them to do awareness in the regions and in the communities and villages. Whilst at the national level, we engage with government stakeholders and other materials, programs with Ghana Health Service, where they talk about the health implications of using the traditional stoves, vis-a-vis the importance of using cleaner technologies. We work with a host of other institutions. The Alliance is a network of membership that comprise manufacturers, retailers, distributors, institutions, and individuals. So all the network members are involved in this. Now, our work with World Education, I think from 2015, with support from the Clean Cooking Alliance, the then Global Alliance for Clean Cook Stoves, sought to establish some pathways for inclusion of clean cooking into our basic education curriculum. So World Education, the Ghana Alliance, and the Ministry of Education through the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment developed a number of curriculum for teaching in schools. And whilst we're doing those, there was a peer education component where students were educating themselves. There was a community component where community-based volunteers were educating their peers as well. And this has led to a number of things, like a lot of the youth taking up clean cooking as a program, some beginning their own enterprises in their program. But for us, the most important job we did for this program was integrating clean cooking and climate and green economy related information into the basic education curriculum of Ghana. And today it's in our curriculum and it is examinable. And we also felt that if we were able to do this, then every cohort, every year, every cohort of students that are turned out, they would already have, or they will be armed with all the information that they need to make cleaner choices as they grow and to inform their households as well on on buying cleaner technologies, I should say. Another component of the program looked at integrating cleaner kitchens in schools. So in Ghana, the government of Ghana gave a to students in Ghana at the basic level. And we realized that most of the school kitchens were using very rudimentary methods of cooking, huge stones, and cooking so close to classrooms with the smoke entering the classrooms. And the cooks themselves were complaining of various issues, eyesight, pressure, and a host of others. So same with support from the CCA, we set off to establish cleaner kitchens and to change their cooking technology from the very rudimental ones, the traditional stones and what have you, to using products like LPG, the EnviroFix wood stove, which greatly reduces wood consumption to about 80% and is highly efficient. And that program has also gained a lot of traction to the point that nationally government is thinking of expanding this one.
That's so great to hear. I could go on and on and on. I just urge you to expatiate a bit more because I've had a chance to speak with you and hear more about your experience in Ghana even before this call. So thanks so much. And Adowa, she's usually very reachable. And if there's anyone who would like to know more about how the Alliance of Ghana was established and how this is working for them, and also the food program, the incorporation of clean cooking into the curriculum in basic education curriculum in Ghana. I'm sure she would like to speak more on that because I find it very, very useful. If we can get people right at a very tender age to understand what clean cooking is and drive that even at their homes, I think we would be really moving in the right direction of achieving what we want to in the clean cooking sector as quick as possible. And also the involvement of youth acting as community ambassadors, I find that very, very insightful, Adowa. And I would like to talk further beyond this call on how we can also incorporate that into the ENACT project. As you would know, awareness creation is a core component of our project. So please. Okay, thanks so much. Just the interest of time as well, we are now open for final questions from the rest of the participants. So questions to Adowa, to Malcolm, and also to Mr. Abdul, who just did their presentation. And I would hand over still to Mercy to do that, to lead or coordinate that part. And then please feel free to type in your questions if you've not done so yet. And also, you're welcome to raise your hand and Mercy can pick you to voice out your question if you would prefer it that way. We're also happy with that. And then after that, we would wrap up, and Angus from the Carbon Trust will provide us with a closing remark, and that will be the end for today. All right. Over to you, Mercy.
Sorry. Thank you so much, Malcolm. Sorry.
You're muted, Mercy.
I apologize for that again. Just thank you so much, Malcolm, Adowa, and Mr. Abdul Karim for your for this very informative session. We are always glad to hear about on the other side, on the policy and and the public sector side, and what your views are regarding improving access to clean cooking, not just in informal settlements, but also maybe on a wider scale. So I see a question here for, I'm just checking this. Sorry, I don't know what's happening with my Q&A. So Lovens has a question to you, Malcolm, and there's also another question to you, Malcolm, from Simon that asks, so Lovens asks if MEX considers ethanol cook stove projects, and IC's Ghana are implementing some 200 stoves in South Line Coast Southline Coast Limited, and they want to find out if there is a possibility to partner with MEX on this.
Well, MEX is more of a kind of a research program. We do have a number of challenge funds which are available on the website. We do have country programs, and I think Ghana is one of the countries where we are active. So it would be interesting for me to maybe introduce you to one of the colleagues who's handling Ghana, and to see if there's any way that work can integrate with the other work that we're doing in the country.
Okay, great. Thank you, Malcolm. There's another question from Simon Thuo, who is asking what the contribution to SDG 7 on SDG 6, sorry, on water is. What clean cooking's contribution to SDG 6 is, as this is one of the major challenges in Africa. I think this is in response to, or asking regarding the connection between clean cooking and other SDGs. Malcolm.
It's a very good question. It's not normally one of the ones that comes up when you're looking at co-benefits. And in fact, the slide we put up, I just very quickly looked at it to make sure I got it right. But in fact, the other SDG impacts we were looking at didn't include water. So I would have to think where the particular benefits for clean cooking would come from there. Obviously, I guess, you know, there's a related health benefit, I guess, coming out of the use of you know, clean cooking if you're improving the quality of the water. But otherwise, I can't really think where the benefit would come from on that side.
Great, thank you very much for that, Malcolm. And of course, these are pertinent questions. Getting, you know, these questions allows us to think outside of what we are thinking at the moment and how energy links to other SDGs. So thank you very much, Simon, for that. It gives us something to think about. If there are any other questions, we welcome questions from the audience. Please feel free to raise your hand, and I will give you the opportunity to ask. Well, it seems there isn't one, and thank you for the applause. So over to you, Carine.
Thanks so much. No questions, no further questions being the information.
Sorry, Abraham just raised his hand, so Abraham, over to you.
Yes, Mercy, apologies. Again, limitation on technology. Instead of raising my hands, I give you an applaud. But here's my question really to my co-partners that have been working on Susan's Bay feasibility, that Afrigas and PayGas. I do very much appreciate the technology that PayGas comes with, that helps indeed for people to have access to pay-as-you-gas. I want to now know clearly, as we seek of implementing that technology in Sierra Leone, will it be with one or with all of the service providers that are, you know, distributing LPG in Sierra Leone? Because we only have about 2 of them. Or will PayGas come and get their own channel of, you know, importing gas in Sierra Leone and selling to the larger population? Over to you, Philip, and I think it's for Philip, yes, PayGas.
Yes, thank you, Abraham. So as I said, PayGas is partnering with all companies, all LPG companies, so there'll be Afrigas, NP. We will not set up a terminal, trucks, bulk trucks, and everything. We work with existing partner to make it more scalable and faster, because I think clean cooking issue is an emergency, especially in Susan's Bay, and we can't wait so long to do our own things in our corner. Let's work together. Let's work with existing partners who know very well the market, very well the challenge of logistics, and just bringing together to find a quick and sustainable solution for clean cooking in Sudan's Bay. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Philippe and Abraham, for that. I think that this brings to the next point. Just to summarize, before I introduce before Angus comes in to provide us with closing remarks, maybe some key takeaways from my side, some summary points. I'm really glad, I'm delighted for the level, the depth of discussions we've had during this brief couple of hours from the different speakers. This has been very eye-opening for us, and so many things for us to consider as a team, as the ENACT project, while we're implementing our solutions in Freetown, but also we're going to be doing the same in Uganda, in Kampala. I think most of the discussions raised here, most of the points raised here are around the challenges posed by limited awareness on clean cooking, the challenges posed by people are even unaware of where to go to if they want to build partnerships, the benefits of partnering with the local or national government, or their respective roles in driving this clean cooking agenda. And another very important point coming up from this discussion here today is that of cost. So all the solutions being proposed by the private sector, as we discussed earlier, and even the challenges raised by the public sector, has been that of the high cost or high perceived cost of clean cooking, especially for low income informal settlements, which definitely often have the source of income is very limited. And this would definitely need to be addressed if we want to drive the clean cooking agenda, because over 60% or so of African urban cities are dominated by informal settlements. So we see the opportunity that that this brings to us, but also the challenge if we do not address clean cooking in informal settlements. And then the partnerships that are needed. We cannot work on our own. We cannot work in silos. There's so much that can be learned from implementation in different countries, in different cities, by different partners, MECs, the Clean Cooking Alliance, local governments across the region. So there's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, you need to go together. And I hope that this would drive us to want to engage even further beyond this webinar, to engage with those of us who've been here, but also with other potential partners. And the ENACT project, which has as one of its core objectives to provide an enabling environment for these engagements and partnerships to be built. We are happy, to the extent that is possible, to provide that assistance that is needed if you would want to partner with a potential stakeholder within our network. Do not hesitate to reach out. A few next steps for us. And before I forget, we are also looking for others to work with us. We've just started piloting this project in Freetown and in Kampala, but we have an agenda. There's so many cities in Africa already who need access to clean cooking, and we want to roll this out in other cities. So please definitely reach out to us. We'd like to partner with academia, with private sector, with donors, just no matter the capacity. And even as project advisors, would like that. So definitely reach out to us, and would also be happy to share our lessons with you so that we don't repeat the same errors that have been made in the past. And then my colleague would post our email address on the chat now, so you can use to reach out to us, to Mercy and myself as project managers, and we'll coordinate that. Next steps from here, remember the session is being recorded, so we're going to post it, we're going to upload that on our social media platforms, and we'll share a summary document with you within the next few days. We will also be, like I mentioned, rolling out the same approach, contracting service providers in Kampala to implement clean cooking solutions in an identified informal settlement. So if you or anyone in your network is aware of potential service providers that we should reach out to, we would very much appreciate that. So please share these contact details with us, as we would want to hear from you, your input, your take, even advice on what approach to use in Uganda would be appreciated. And then after this, there's going to be a survey that would be launched. Immediately when you log out of the webinar, a survey will pop up. We kindly ask that you respond to this and tell us your impression about the webinar, the topics you'd want us to discuss about, but also importantly, just let us know if you would consent to us using your, adding you to the ENACT project mailing list so that we can share further project updates with you in the future. And then last but not the least, my team would be, some members of my team would be in the upcoming the upcoming Clean Cooking Forum that would be held in Ghana in October. So if you're going to be there, please let us know. We'd like to engage in person and take this discussion further. And again, very big thank you to my team, Ayanda, Aziza, Mercy, Alexandra, Kweku, the ENACT team, who have been working endlessly to make that sure this webinar is what we have today. And thanks to all the participants. I'm going to hand over to Angus now to provide us with a closing remarks.
Hi, hello, and thanks very much for providing the opportunity to speak here. Good afternoon to everybody, I think, on the call, maybe good morning to some people, depending on where they are in the world. Thanks very much for the really insightful session we've had today. I think it's been super useful and valuable to me. So my name is Angus van Totwood. I'm a senior manager at the Carbon Trust and the program manager for the Transforming Energy Access. We at the Carbon Trust play a sort of fairly central role in some of the activities going on that we've been discussing. We work as both the Transforming Energy Access delivery coordinators. We also play as the Ayrton Secretariat support for the FCDO, which encompasses programs like MEX, includes also the Low Energy Inclusive Appliances and the Climate Compatible Growth Program. So T itself has directly supported programs such as ENACT, which we've obviously been hearing about today, as well as some of the sort of technology manufacturing suppliers such as Burn Manufacturing, Gamos, EnviroFit, Sistema Bio, and several others. So I've been asked to stand in at fairly short notice, unfortunately. Rob MacGyver, who's from FCDO, unfortunately caught COVID yesterday, and asked me to step in. And when I asked him sort of about the speaker event, I was told the target audience for this was going to be government officers, mainly within sub-Saharan Africa. So probably worth people want to know a bit more about where the money is available for this. Well, I mean, I think most of the money obviously comes up from some of the multilateral and bilateral arrangements, such as the ESMAP Clean Cooking Fund. That's probably the largest one, but there's NDEV and several others. But I think one thing that we do know, and that's unfortunately the case, is that we're woefully kind of inadequate in funding, given the challenge that we're facing of providing 923 million people in Africa with clean cooking and 2.4 billion people globally by 2030. I think it's just going to be very challenging. I was at SE4 in Kigali earlier this year. I was fortunate enough to be there, and it's really great to see how this has all come along and moved along, and the attention in the sector has got so much better than where it was kind of 15 years ago, when it was completely being ignored almost, and even sort of 5 or 6 years ago, it was still much more on the sidelines than it is now. I think despite that attention, we still need to really kind of move forwards, and there's still huge gaps of it that we're seeing. Even with the funding that we have, as we've seen today, there's still lots of sort of questions on on technology. What are the right messages for clean cooking? What are the technology and business model solutions that we're looking at, not just from a kind of research and evidence perspective, but really for scaling and really getting to high scale, which is where we need to be going with this. Will we be looking at applications of the solar home sector with PayGas system, or will we be looking at PayGas solutions as we've seen today? And then there are other sort of business and technology solutions, such as aggregated carbon credits, appliance financing, bulk procurement models that we're looking at in some of the T program, and other things, results-based finance. So there's still quite a lot of areas still to be explored, I suppose. Really, I think from a funder's perspective, and I can really speak for FCDO here, the plea is probably really for us all to take a look at the nature of the reassessed problem, and really first, in order to get a direct financing into the sector in the most optimal way, really. We want to make sure we're getting the best impact and the best value for money for the work that's being undertaken. Okay. From a technologies point of view, or from a fuels point of view, so I think it's obviously there's a discussion on what fuels are most appropriate, as we've seen today. Some of these some of these situations might be getting a bit saturated. It may be better to think about supporting, instead of supporting suppliers in a kind of technology push-based model of approach, we might want to look more at a demand-led model and through a sort of informed education of clean fuel choices instead. And that's been, again, touched on, education by some of the speakers as well, as a really important thing. You know, prior to COVID in Ukraine, I think we were all probably in a place where we were thinking LPG was the kind of go-to clean cooking solution. There is a question now whether that is the right case with current price volatilities in the case. We're already seeing that with the rising cost of fossil fuels, sometimes singular fuel dependencies at any kind of level, be it city-based or national indeed, anywhere in the world, can have its own problems as well. And when you put on things like a leave no one behind lens, where you can kind of subsidize the poor where prices are for energy are high, is that really a sustainable long-term model, I suppose? And I think, sort of just as a final word on LPG, I guess it is, you know, you could make the argument now with higher energy prices that sort of now is a time to catalyze away from LPG, if that's the best option. But this might not be the case in the long term, because prices obviously can fluctuate quite heavily. And if prices go down again, those existing business models are going to potentially suffer. So we're seeing kind of in places like Tanzania, where there's some good examples as a country where they were on a pathway towards LPG, and it was proposed that they might want to look into electric. That's not necessarily going to be a binary solution for them, but I think the diversification strategy of your fuel mix might end up paying dividends in the future. For electric cooking, you know, we've seen, and again that was touched on earlier, how this kind of like the fear of the higher price per meal through electric cooking has, as a result of some of the technology improvements, among other things, now become something of a myth in certain circumstances. Obviously, there are technical and social challenges around this as well, but we're moving the economics in the right direction. And like ESMAP have done some work to show that in places like Uganda and Kenya, if clean cooking can be tied into national energy planning approaches, it could in fact be a cheaper option, you know. So on the electric theme, obviously, we you know, the T program that I represent works very closely with our sister program MEX, that Malcolm discussed before. MEX has been extended to 2026, and we'll be looking to answer some of these questions that have been raised in terms of investigating how affordability and availability of future models, of fuel models, may change in countries in recent years, and how that affects our sustainable planning as it relates to cooking. MEX will also be looking into some countries to apply evidence into processes seeking to integrate cooking into national energy planning, particularly where excess installed capacity can be utilised. Demonstrations of this could improve electricity tariffs, assured revenues, and more affordable cooking, particularly through things like the rollout of energy price caps, or EPCs. So it's also envisaged that the same evidence that's being sort of provided in MEX could be transposed over to the T program and bring kind of around more advanced and perhaps improved utilization of things like carbon credits to sort of improve the kind of pro-poor fuel choice options that are being made available. Anyway, so I guess in summary, I've probably thrown out a lot of questions more than insights here. There are certainly many more people on the call that have shown to be more informed than me and better for this. I do think the ENACT program is really spearheading a lot of this work into the models for clean cooking deployment, and hopefully some of this will be replicated by attendees on the call, as well as some of the cities and representatives that are part of their membership. So thanks a lot.
Great. Thanks a lot, Angus. Thanks a lot for that, for just wrapping up and accumulating everything that we've said into through your final or closing remarks. And we will also be posting a link to the TIER platform or to the TIER website, so you can have a better view or overview of what the TIER program is about for all participants, and also just be on the lookout for any exciting opportunities or the reach, the geographical areas where the TIER program is being implemented, especially in African cities. Okay. And of course, if you have any questions also related to Angus's final input, do not hesitate to reach out. He would endeavor to respond to them even post this webinar, and we will share with everyone else. Okay. It has been an utmost pleasure moderating this webinar. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I hope you've learned a lot from it. And I hope you are ready to take charge, to take action in your respective communities in driving the clean cooking agenda. Okay. Thanks so much. And that would be all from my side. Bye, everybody.
Thank you and bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.
I hope to see you all in Ghana in October.
I would see you there.